everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Alina. I'm a mom of 4 and I'm an aspiring author. So welcome back. This is episode 6 and today we are talking about character creation and building a cast of characters for your novel. Okay, so this is my second novel that I'm writing. I finished an epic fantasy with my husband a few months ago and it's querying right now. And so I'm getting ready to start a new project and just move forward while the querying process is happening. So I want to share kind of what worked for me with the first book and what I'm going to be doing this time around to kind of jump into my new novel. Okay, first things first. You can find 500 questionnaires that ask you everything about your characters that you're writing about. What's their favorite song? What's their favorite color? How tall are they? Yada, 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 all the way through. And I did do that with like many books that I thought I was going to write. And this last time I did a little bit of that, but I referred to it later when I was going through my notes and going through like how I researched and what kind of worked and what didn't, what stood the test of time and what didn't. And basically nothing in my character reports made it through in the story. I don't think they're as useful as people make them out to be. And I honestly think that doing big like 500 question surveys like that about people or big profiles or whatever about your characters just keeps you from taking the steps into actually writing your novel. So it's just a deterrent. You are procrastinating. It is not worth it. And so I want to share with you guys the few simple things that I do that I find I use in the story a lot, and I can get through in the story pretty easily and I can refer back to pretty easily, where I know what I need to know and then I can move on. Okay, so there are 7 things basically that I use to craft my characters. And once I have those 7 things, I have enough to get the story started. And then if there are other details that I add in as I'm writing the story, if I realize they have a favorite song or something random like that, then I'll add it to the character profile just down at the bottom. That helps me not to get too distracted with all of the details and to just give them a personality from the get-go. Okay, the first thing that you want to have, the basics: name, age, appearance. When it comes to appearance, sometimes if there's something special that I should write down, then I'll write that down, but usually I'll create a character photo using AI, or I'll find something on Pinterest that kind of gives me what I'm looking for, and then I'll refer back to that if I'm ever talking about how they look, or if somebody else is noticing them or noticing something about how they look, then I can refer back to that and just go off of the photo. Otherwise, I have name, age, the photo, and then any weird characteristics, if they have a scar or just something that should stand out that's abnormal, and I make it really simple and then I move on. Second thing, I use Brandon Sanderson's sliding scales because I have found no way better to show how my character grows over the course of the story than using his sliding scales. So he uses 3 sliding scales for his characters, and it's likability, proactivity, and competence. You can watch his videos. He uses like Star Wars characters as an example, but some of them are higher in competence, some of them are lower in competence, some of them are very proactive but not very competent. And then likability you would add into that too. And so you can create a really interesting character using that, and it helps to inform the movement that character is going to have over the course of the story. So instead of thinking, oh, they really like doing art and they really like doing music and this one really likes doing basketball, instead of thinking of those things that are not going to have a huge impact on your story, you're thinking about their personality and how they act when faced with situations. One thing that I do break down a little bit more than how he does is in competence. I'll generally think of different things that they have competence in. If they have high competence, I want to be clear that they're competent in magic, or they're competent in math, or whatever it is that is their talent that they are giving to the story. I'll make a note of that. Or if they are not competent, I want to make it clear what they are not competent in. And they may keep that for the length of the story because I don't want that to change. I just want their likability to change. They're still not very competent. Maybe they are really competent and they want to stay that way the whole story. This is something like Sherlock Holmes. He's very competent, and he is always very competent, and it doesn't really go down. Whereas a lot of hero's journey characters, they are not very competent in the beginning, and as they hone their craft, they become more competent. Okay, moving on from that, the third thing that I do, voice and dialogue. That is really important to me so that as I'm writing out what they're saying, I'm using the correct words that sound like them. Are they witty? Are they hesitant? Are they rude? Maybe they're extremely confident. Do they like making jokes? Do they refer everything back to what they're really good at? Maybe they're a good fisherman, and so everything that they talk about has to do with fish in some respect. Just give yourself a basic idea of how they're going to be speaking, because when you start writing, you're going to hone it in a little bit better as you write and as you feel out how they're going to be speaking. But if you have a general idea at the beginning, then their voice won't change dramatically over the course of the story without it needing to, because of things that they've experienced. Number 4, character development. Where are they starting at the beginning of story and where are they ending up? A lot of this can be linked to the scales of proactivity, the Brandon Sanderson scales. You can say they start really likable and end really unlikable. You can say that they start very proactive and end very not proactive, unproactive. Anyway, the idea is that your character is going to learn something or accomplish something or become somebody new by the end of the story, and who do you want them to become? Again, for all of these, you're just putting something simple down. You don't want to make a big essay out of it. It's not a thesis. It's just something simple to get you started writing so that you can make sure that progress is seen over the course of the book. Okay, number 5, this is one of my favorite ones to do. And it has served me very well, especially in the last book that I wrote. And I'll give you an example. Number 5 is quirks, talents, and interests. So I try to keep this very minimal. Sometimes they'll have multiple, but I like to have one that's very specific that I am using to paint a picture or illustrate their personality. So for instance, one of the characters in my fantasy novel, my epic fantasy that is querying, he was orphaned at a really young age, and he was raised by palace staff, and he was a king, so the relationship was kind of awkward between him and everybody else, but he really wanted to connect with people. He was a very outgoing child. And so he developed this habit of eating candy and always having candy with him, and would consistently hand out candy to people as he was hanging out with them or to start conversations. And when our main character meets him, this is part of his personality and how he reaches out to her and how she feels connected to him. And it shows that he does have this longing to be friends with people and to recognize them and to be giving. And so you get that thing in his personality, but his quirk is just he likes candy. It's just how you use that throughout the story that informs you on his personality, informs you on how he acts with other people, what he's looking for in relationships. And you can do that with any number of things, any little quirks that you give people. But I also used it as a teaching tool because they use flowers to make a lot of their foods, and the flowers can help you become calm. They can help you to have energy or to be protected, just different things like that. And so he'll give her a candy in a certain situation, showing that he's aware of how she's feeling, and say, hey, here, like, have this, it's gonna help you calm down, it's chamomile or whatever. He'll pick something and go for it. And that also allows the reader to learn, okay, this is, and I'm immersed in this world. There's these candies and they're made of flowers and they mean things and they're gonna help her with this. And it makes the world seem more real. So I used it for that purpose too. And you wanna find quirks that you can use in that way, where you're going to use it to inform everybody of that character, who they are, and how they're gonna interact with the world around them. Okay, number 6, backstory. You want a backstory on people so that there are no surprises. This doesn't need to be extensive, it just needs to be enough to get you started in your story. So for example, I have one character in my last book where he grew up in a different area than everybody else did. That's his backstory as a child. And so he speaks more of the ancient language, and he'll throw out ancient language words here and there that most people are not saying around them because it's not as common where they live, but it was more common where he lived, and so he has a habit of doing that. And the main character grew up far away from everybody, so there are vocabulary words that she doesn't know in this new system that she's found herself in. So her backstory is showing what she knows and what she doesn't about where she is now. It also helps to have that so that you can add some amount of subplot to your story. For example, you have family members that they would know from beforehand, from before where we're starting. You would have places that they are familiar with. Maybe they used to love doing something and they stopped doing it for some reason, and so that comes up later in the plot and nobody knows that they were interested in that particular thing, and now all of a sudden they have so much to say about it. You just want to make sure you know the things that you should know that not necessarily the reader needs to know, but they will find out eventually. And you need to know that beforehand so that when it comes up in the plot, it's not like, oh, surprise, that showed up and we had no inkling that that was the thing beforehand. Whereas if you know it beforehand, then as you're writing, you can drop hints and it makes it more clear that this person has a backstory. They lived before this story started and they weren't just plopped down into the world and started living life. Number 7. I say challenges and growth for this one, but basically it is, how am I going to hit this character where it hurts and how am I going to force them to grow? So what pain point does this character have where something in the plot is going to happen to them and it is either going to break them or it is going to force them to become stronger? You want something like that for each of your characters. Now, some characters don't need this because some characters we're not seeing that growth phase. And in fact, this is a very like Sherlock Holmes thing. He's not changing, he's the same character. In these cases, those characters aren't really hit where it hurts. However, when you have film adaptations, usually they try to find the humanity in these characters somehow to show that over the course of this issue with Moriarty, for instance, it's not just an exercise for his mind. It's actually going to hit him where it hurts. It might be somebody that he has feelings for. It might be that he feels like he's going to lose and he can't lose. He needs to win. He needs to find the answers. He needs to know what's going to happen. And generally, those types of stories are far more interesting to read because you want to see how people handle situations like that. So I try to do that for at least the vast majority of my main characters, if not all of them. And if I'm doing multiple books, then I can kind of spread it out over the books. But if I'm doing one, I want to make sure they're all growing to some extent. So those are my 7 questions that I ask myself when I make a character and I put it all together. What are some quirks, maybe backstories? Maybe you got some ideas as you were listening to this on what you could do with your characters to make them more interesting or to give them more life. Share your ideas in the comments below or just thoughts that came to you. I would love to hear them, and I will see you guys in the next video. This is my planning video. So if you've been around my channel at all, you know I make digital planners and I am big on making sure I have a plan for anything that I'm doing, writing, momming, crafting. I do a lot of things. I don't have a very deadline type schedule, but with writing, I feel like I have to do it or it just doesn't get done. I don't get to it, I push it off because then other things came up. And so I really want to do that with my writing this time around. As I've said in previous videos, I'm doing 5 weeks to 50K. That's kind of my goal, is write 50,000 words in 5 weeks. So next video is going to be me sitting down and planning that out and telling you guys what I'm going to challenge myself to do each of those weeks. And yeah, so join me in the next video. We can kind of plan this out together. You can get some ideas from me on how to approach that. And after that, we will get into querying. I'll talk more about that in the next episode. So see you guys in the next video.